Hi, I'm indie fantasy author Melinda Kucsera, and in this episode of Fantasy, Lore, and More, Raven Oak is joining me to talk about Amaskan's Blood and to tease us about Amaskan's Honor, which will be coming out hopefully soon, but we'll find out more about that in a few minutes. Welcome, and let's talk books.
Absolutely. I'm Raven Oak, and I'm in my office outside the Seattle area. And yeah, I'm excited to talk about the Amaskan's Blood is part of the Boahim trilogy. Um, it's kind of my nod to basically Hebrew mythology to some degree. And when I was putting together this trilogy, I was looking at basically wanting to write about the concept of justice, but also the concept of justice from a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different religions and ideals. And so that's kind of where that concept for the trilogy came from. And you mentioned Damascus Blood is why we're here. And so this is trying to not get glare from the light there, but that's Amaskan's Blood, nice big door stopper. And book two, Amaskan's War, is already out and has been for a bit. And so, yeah, you mentioned Amaskan's Honor, and the goal is for that to be fall of this year. So, crossing fingers that no more trauma medically wise happens, and I can finish up the edits on that and get that going.
But let's all send collectively like good wishes for good health, for so the third book can come out.
Yes,
So
yes. Um, I'm for people who are not familiar with me, I am a disabled queer author and artist. And I had mentioned briefly to Melinda before we were on camera that I'm also a musician. I have lots of artistic things going on in my life. And it's one of those things where I don't know if your listeners have ever or viewers have ever watched the show Leverage, the television show. They came out with a continuation of it more recently, but the Leverage show itself, I think, was like mid 2000s when it first came out. And the concept was this group of people, one of them a thief, one of them a grifter, like bad people, so to speak. They got together to give justice to people who weren't going to get it the normal way. So let's say you had a family where someone got cancer and they ended up bankrupt with medical debt, and they lost their house and they lost their car, and they lost everything, and it was this horrible traumatic event. This group of people basically would go and use crime to to basically ruin the medical establishments that made that happen. And then they would get all the money from ruining those companies and give it to the people who actually needed it and get rid of their debt. And it was this very vigilante sense of justice that really appealed to me. I'm very much, if I were more ably bodied, I would be a hardcore activist for many things. And unfortunately, I cannot do all the things that I wish I could. And so for me, I look at a lot of the events that go on in our world and how people who don't deserve to be harmed get harmed by capitalism and politics and all these things. And between my love of Leverage and my sense of justice, I wanted to write a character who basically got to do what the Leverage guys got to do, but with a little more, I guess, goodness to the character. And that's how my main character Adelei came about. That's how my Order of Amaska came about, which is what that word is. Amaskan is meaning that they're a member of this Order of Amaska. And so I like to describe them as being kind of half monk and half samurai and all assassin. And they get sent into various places to seek justice from people who wouldn't get it any other way. So, in a feudal system where you have kings and queens ruling, obviously people with wealth and means are going to be able to go, hey, that person killed my sister, I'm going to go stab them and everything's great. But what about the poor serf down the street whose mom got killed by somebody that he looked at wrong or she looked at wrong? Where's their justice? And so these Amaskans get to go and be hired to do these jobs no one else would take, so that your underdogs get justice. And that's kind of where that all stemmed from. Um, the and for me, when I was writing it, while that was my initial impetus, everything changed as I started writing it, because around the time I was writing the early drafts of it, I discovered that I had three sisters that I didn't know about. And that came about through getting back in contact with my birth mother, who basically abandoned me as a kid because drugs were more important. And she claimed she was clean and wanted to reconnect. That did not go as expected, and did not end in a positive note. But having this sudden family thrust upon me, and the uncertainty of, okay, does blood family matter that much? I thought chosen family was okay, and how do you reconcile all of that? Hit me so hard that I suddenly had a different idea and framework for how I was writing this story. Adelei is sent into this kingdom to try to protect people and get justice. But in doing so, she discovers that her chosen family is not what she expected, and her birth family is not what she expected either. Everything she's ever known has been a lie. And so she's struggling with the same concepts that I struggled with. What do I do with these newfound family members that I didn't want, didn't expect, didn't need? How do I find out who I am in relation to these family members? Like, where's my story in all of this? And so it was, as I was writing Adelei, much more of myself went into her character than I expected. And it was like writing her was almost a form, I don't want to be cliche, but I'm totally going to be cliche. It was almost a form of therapy for me to process everything I was going through this filtered vision of, haha, this character gets justice for everything. Maybe that will make me feel like I got a sense of justice out of all of this. And so that's kind of how her character and her story developed. And then it continued into Amaskan's War, and then the trilogy will end with Amaskan's Honor. There will be some other offshoot novels, but nothing in that particular timeline as that story gets told and completed. But I don't know. I've written a lot of novels. I've got a lot of stories out there in the world. This one is definitely the more near and dear to me, I think, because of those personal connections. And I've done a lot of yammering at this point.
No, that's why you're here. That's why you're here, to tell us like all the things we wouldn't know when we were reading the book. So keep talking. It's fine.
Oh, yeah. So I used to be a lot more eloquent as a speaker. You know, I'm a former teacher. I was a former English and computer teacher. And so I'm used to talking ad nauseum about a great many of things. Unfortunately, I did get COVID twice, and I got long COVID. And so my brain fog and my ability to find words sometimes is a lot less than it was. It's not necessarily affecting my writing as much, because if you're not a writer, you might not know, but we spend a lot of time in revisions and cleaning things up and going, oh, that's the word I was looking for that day.
Yes.
So if I stumble sometimes, this is more to the listener, reader, watcher people, but if I stumble sometimes audibly, it's some of it is processing issues at this point. When I'm speaking, it tends to hit it harder. So, my apologies if I ramble at all, but I'm very good at rambling. And, it's it's one of those things where Amaskan's Blood at its root is also what I call a sister story. The two main characters in it, the main focus initially was Adelei, but I ended up having points of view character also from her twin sister Margaret, and they are nothing alike and everything alike, which is, I think, pretty standard for twins. They were separated at birth, which is where that whole chosen family versus blood family kind of conflict comes in. And Margaret has been spoiled. She is going to, take over the throne at some point one day. And she has a very naive and innocent way of looking at the world. Whereas Adelei was raised inside an order of assassins, basically. And while they do follow a tenet and a core set of beliefs that they are doing what the gods wish, that they are seeking justice, that what they're doing is necessary work and holy work even, they're still assassins. They kill people for a living. They do bad things. And so Adelai's way of looking at the world is very different. She is not naive about anything really, and yet she's very naive about what love and family and certain concepts are. And as you read through Amaskan's Blood, it's like Adelei starts up here with this, the world is really horrible and I must kill people. And she starts to understand Margaret's world. And Margaret, she starts over on this side with this very naive innocentness. And she kind of goes over here and starts to understand this gritty underbelly of what's going on in her kingdom and in the world itself as well. And so in some ways they kind of switch places in their character arcs and in their ability to function with each other and others. And I've always wanted to flip characters in that way. I'm a big fan of subverting tropes and playing around with things like that. I think the best compliment I ever got was from another author who said that Maskin's Blood is if George R. R. Martin had written Disney's Tangled.
Oh, wow.
I never set out to do a Rapunzel retelling. People keep comparing it to that, even though that was never my intention. But I can see some of the parallels, because if you look at Disney's Tangled, which is in itself is a Rapunzel retelling, the whole mother's knows best, the whole toxic parent figure, the lack of freedom, the imprisonment, the subtle themes and flavors that are in it. Like, for all that that's a Disney movie, it's a dark Disney movie.
I admit I've never seen it.
Oh, you should see it. You should fix that. For all that, yeah, you have Disney movies like Lion King where they kill, Simba's dad. This is darker in different ways, because this is dealing with toxic relationships. It's dealing with this base level that most of us experience at some point with somebody. And, we all have that one family member kind of thing. And so it deals a lot with that. And so I can see the parallels in it. I think the George R. R. Martin comparison, from what I've seen in some reviews, is I love world building. I promise that I will not spend 20 pages describing a table leg. It is not necessary. You can do world building without going that far. But it does have a thick world, a very well built world. But also, I'm not afraid to kill people. As I said, the main character is an assassin. And so I think sometimes people are like, they see that comparison and they think, oh, this is going to be really cool. And it is. But sometimes they get very afraid. Oh, you said George R. R. Martin.
Yeah.
And then they start worrying.
Yeah.
Yes, I kill people. No, I'm not giving you a red wedding. It's okay. Take a deep breath.
Because I hear him and
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I could not read the Game of Thrones. I DNF book 1. It was
Mhm.
too dark, too bloody. There was no redeeming. I hated everybody. And there was, so I hear it and I cringe. I hear and that for me as a reader is like red flag, walk away, because this is going to be dark and bloody and it's going to have incest and other like things that you really don't want to read in your fantasy. This is not something you should read. So I'm one of those readers who gets scared when they hear that.
And so I wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
Because,
thank you.
Yes, there are elements of. Honestly, I think people said that comparison because at the time he was the big hot shit in terms of epic fantasy. Actually, am I allowed to swear on your thing?
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
I'll just, when it goes up on Spotify, I'll just mark it. The word escapes me. There's a thing you check for that.
Yeah.
I can't think of the word.
It's one of those things where people brought him up because he was the bigness at the time. Mm-hmm. But epic fantasy, this is epic fantasy. I think if I had written this when Brandon Sanderson was more of the hotness, they might have made that comparison. Or, Peter Aurelian or any of the other, Robert Jordan, any of the big epic fantasy guys, they probably would have made that comparison.
I will never be compared to him.
Well,
I'm so far the other side of the spectrum.
What irritates me is that no one thought to say, oh, it's if Kate Elliott had written Disney's Tangled. I'm like, you do know that women have been writing epic fantasy for ages. Hello, Melanie Ron.
Didn't she have like the Empire of the Sun or the Star or the? Yes. I can't think of the name of it. I've read them. Yeah. I can picture the covers, but the title is like, can't remember it.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
It's okay, but like, women have been writing epic fantasy for ages.
Yes, Mercedes Lackey and McCaffrey.
Rather than always the guys. But
Andre Norton.
I think for me, I won't say that the story is not dark because it does have dark moments. I think that when you're dealing with an organization that thinks that they're doing the right thing by killing people that are your murderers and rapists and bad people of the world, when you have that kind of organization and you also have this storyline about toxic relationships, you're gonna have darkness. Like, you can't not.
Yeah.
I have been hesitant to label it as dark fantasy because I know as a reader of dark fantasy, I understand the tropes that come with that. And I understand some people get then hesitant to read it for that reason. Yeah, I mean, I hesitate to label that. But at the same time, I'm not going to shy away and say it's not dark. There's definitely darkness in it.
You wouldn't be able to avoid it though.
You wouldn't.
With all you said, and even like I read the opposite side of the spectrum, and I have books that have dark moments too. Sometimes you just can't avoid it.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think if your book has more lighter moments, it doesn't have doesn't hit the dark fantasy stuff and doesn't have a ton of darkness, it doesn't have to be labeled dark fantasy. A book can have dark moments and not be dark fantasy, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and it's definitely not grimdark. Oh my gosh, no.
I hate grimdark.
I hate grimdark because
I read one of them and I was like, okay, no, never again. This is not for me.
My belief is that hope is what makes us human.
Yes.
It's what separates us from the sludge. And you can't tell a story about people and not have hope. And that's what grimdark is. It's the lack of hope, which to me, that's not really humanity. That's not people. That's not connections anymore. That's just, I don't know, garbage, darkness. I feel like that would be choosing to, I'm not somebody who believes in the devil, but I feel like that's like choosing to believe everything is only dark and hopeless. And at that point, why are you alive?
Okay. A very unpopular opinion, but some of Robin Hobb's works are very grim dark.
Yes. Yes.
Somebody please save Fitzroy, please.
Well, and that's the thing is,
his situation is so hopeless.
You can have darkness, but you have to give readers, in my opinion, just a glimpse that something might go right. And so,
Yeah.
like, book one,
I think we need a little more than might, because I
yeah.
read the trilogy with one of the Assassins trilogy that Robin Hobb has, the first one,
Mhm.
and there is the possibility that something might go right, but it never does. And I had to stop reading after the end of
I
that
know
first
Robin.
trilogy, because I was like, it's never, the hope's always going to be there, but it's never going to happen.
I know
And I
Robin.
can't read that. I understand why she wrote that. I understand that was for a
Yeah.
particular. I'm not the fan that it was written
Yeah.
for, so I don't hate on them. They're excellently written. I just wish something
It's
went right
funny.
for him.
It's funny because I know Robin, and we've talked about this, and so we've talked about the necessity of hope, and
Mm-hmm.
she definitely has different readers in mind when she's writing certain things. I
Yeah.
will admit that I have not read um, any of that side of her work, and I haven't for a very particular reason. Because when I wrote Amaskan's Blood, she'd already had some of those books out. I wasn't aware of her at the time. We had not met and talked or anything like that. But when Amaskan's Blood came out, somebody made a comparison to Robin Hobb. So as an author, when that happens, I made the conscious decision to not read it because I did not want to be influenced by anything she was doing with her plot and characters, because that can happen. You
Yeah.
don't mean it to. It's not even like you set out to do it. It's just that everything you read influences
Mm-hmm.
you. It forms you. It changes you. If it's good, it should. And I did not want to be influenced by anything she was doing, since we were both writing about assassins. I was like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't want that to
Understandable.
happen. And so eventually, when this trilogy is done, then I can actually know the pain that you were talking about. But it's one of those things where this book has brief magic and hints at magic, because it's kind of setting up bigger things. Um,
Oh, there's going to be more books in that world. You were saying that before, that there
yeah.
might be other
So
offshoots.
this book, the book two, not only has a lot of magic, but it actually has romance too, which book one
Oh.
does not really. And so if you're one of those people who you like a little romance with your fantasy, I promise if you keep reading, this is your baby. And Amaskan's Honor will continue the romance thread that picks up in book two into book three. Book three finishes out the trilogy, but one of the things that happen with Amaskan's Blood is there's another character who started off as a side character, and I know you're familiar with this one
Oh.
happening, but this side character is a 50, oh, I forgot, she's 55, 56 in the book. It's been a while, but an older warrior who used to be an Amaskan. She became a fan favorite to the extent that everybody has been clamoring for ages for her story to be told. And in the Wayward Magic, the trilogy thing, that was you that did that, right? Am I
Yes,
remembering correctly? Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
did the
Um,
I did that trilogy. I'm kind of thinking about doing something in the future, maybe with a tighter theme, because I feel like we could have done even, but we did amazing. But I feel like we could have done even better
mhm,
if we had narrowed it down a little bit, because I
yeah.
mean everybody was so wonderful in there. We all worked so hard, but I feel like the concept, we weren't narrow enough,
Mhm.
and that left some readers on the table who would have really enjoyed those anthologies. But still, it was a fun project. I'm glad I
The
did it. And I'm glad that I chose the publication date that I did. Who would have known that my birthday in 2020 was a day like New York State and the whole country would shut down and people would be looking for something to read? And here we were with an offering for them.
it,
Like, could you, like, I still can't believe that. Like, it feels like it was a dream, but we lived it.
the my three stories that are in those
Yes.
deal with Ida Warhammer, who is the fan favorite that I'm talking about from A Mask of
Yes.
Blood.
Did you ever
I
republish those on your own? Because the
well,
rights
that's what I'm
reverted
working
back.
on. That's what I'm working on.
Awesome.
So one of the books that's going to be an offshoot for this trilogy is Ida's getting her own book. It will have those 3 stories reworked because she will get a full novel that will be her back history leading
Oh, I
up to
see.
her presence in Amaskan's blood. So that you
Nice.
can see how she got the scar that runs across her neck, how she stopped being an Amaskan, like all of the big questions people had about her. You get to see the forming of that. And so that one is a 2025 title, but also in 2025, I will be re-releasing all 3 books with Ear to Ear, which is Ida's book, and a bonus unpublished book about Boheme in general that will be part of a larger Kickstarter with really super fancy copies for people who are like me, who I don't know how well you can see behind me, but I like my pretty books.
Well, I want your pretty books because I was telling Raven this before we started. I'm a big fan of hers. I have many of her books. I haven't finished them all. I have a maybe there's no audiobook, and I have my eyes have some issues, so I have a hard time reading on screen. But I'm slowly making it through. That's why I put the drops
Audiobooks
in
are
all the time.
expensive.
Yeah, no, I'm not no pressure or
Oh
anything.
yeah. Well, you
I have
know,
a screen reader when my eyes hate me. But
the difficulty with being a hybrid author, and what that means is I have things that are traditionally published as well as independent small press, but
because she's amazing.
even my traditionally published things, if they're not through larger press, tend to be through
Yeah.
mid or small presses, and audiobooks are just expensive.
Oh, I know.
I'm not
priced them out.
okay with using AI, so I won't sign any contracts that allow for that. And I think that can sometimes limit things. I've also run into the problem that everybody wants me to do Class of Exile as an audiobook, which would be great, but they want me to do it because I'm the only one who can pull off Earl's voice and accent correctly. I kind of feel like that a little bit with the Boheme trilogy too. When you write epic fantasy and you have a lot of words that there's an old tongue language in here that is based on Hebrew that my apologies to the Jewish community. I tried. I love linguistics. It's a big hobby of mine. I'm minoring in it, so I did do my best as a linguist to not butcher things linguistically, language wise. But I'm sure I did. So my apologies to Jewish people who speak Hebrew if you ever recognize some words and go, that's not quite, sorry, I tried. But it's one of those things where that makes me want to read the audiobooks for those as well, because I don't want your general audio narrator to not get the words correct. That would drive me crazy as an author. I'm a control freak. I really like being
Me
able to
too.
say what gets done. And so, yeah, I'm way behind on audio stuff, and
Oh,
it'll
me
come
too.
eventually. But part of the long COVID thing too is that for a long stretch of time, talking for long stretches was very painful because COVID can mess with your throat and your lungs. And so the idea of reading let's see, Amaskan's Blood's what, 420 something pages, and it's small print in this. It's your typical epic fantasy small print. So it's 150,000 words. The idea of reading that wasn't
Just
going to
to
happen at the
just
time.
just to put some context around this, because my first book is 165,000 words, and I tried to narrate it myself. I got up to chapter 27 before I was like, I can't do anymore.
Yeah.
And it took months, and every time to record one chapter, because the chapters are long in that book. After that book, I made them all a lot shorter. Each chapter is about 5,000 words, so trying to read one 5,000 word chapter would take me several hours because I would make mistakes. I'd forget what the voices were. I'd have to re-record sections. My neighbors would
Mm-hmm.
decide to drop heavy plates for no reason. in the middle
Yeah.
of the evening, or slam the door really loud, or like up and down the stairs really loudly, or there was my refrigerator decided to hum along with me because I forgot to turn it off. Like all these, it would take me 3 hours to record one chapter to get one good take, and then it would take several hours to edit it because you have to remove the breaths. You have
Processing.
to, it's just so anybody knows, like, so I started adding it up, and it was taking me like 1,000 hours just to do those 27 chapters, and I was like, this is not sustainable. Like, people want new books. I could do
This
one
is
or the
why.
other. It's too much. So
This
I
is
have
why
great
audiobooks are
respect.
expensive.
Yeah, I have great respect for narrators. I think they get better to the point where they can do something in less
Yeah.
time,
Well,
maybe
I mean,
less takes than me, the complete total amateur who can't remember what voice I use for which character.
I'm in the process of shopping around for an agent because I want to sell foreign rights and audio rights. Because if I can find a larger publisher
Right.
for audio rights, then I can get a narrator who, when I send them recordings of this is how you say this word, this is how you say this word, they actually do it.
Oh, wow.
Versus a lot of your bargain basement narrators who, don't. And so, because my background is also music, my my graduate degree is a computer degree, but my undergrad was English education, but also music. I was actually a semester away from a Bachelor of Music in music composition and theory. So that's kind of my background. I have a home recording studio. I can record this stuff if I had the physical ability to. Um,
It's
but you're not
awesome.
wrong that the processing time, the number of takes,
Yeah.
just even though I have a home studio, there's still things outside of my control.
Yeah.
If a cat decides to puke and I need to stop what I'm doing to go deal with that, it's not going to pick up on the recording necessarily, but it is something that would interrupt my ability to keep recording. And all those things matter.
Yeah. And you might
It's time
sound
consuming.
different when you came
Yeah.
back, not
Mhm.
meaning to. You think you're fine,
Mhm.
then you listen to it, because I had that where like my neighbor would knock and I'd stop and I'd come back, and I could hear the even though it was like this transition was seamless because I stopped it and then I started and I knew I marked where I stopped, but I could hear the difference in my voice. Like
Mhm.
something about the recording. I'm recording in my kitchen. Something about the kitchen changed while I was out there, and it sounded different. And I tried playing around with settings and mixing and mastering to try and get around that, and I would end up having to re-record the entire thing again because the two didn't match, and you could hear. And
Mhm.
like, I have really good hearing for that stuff, so maybe I was a
Yeah.
bit picky,
And most
but
people don't. So go you. I mean, it's hard to have a good ear when it comes to music. And I say music because I don't know that a lot of people realize this, but narration and voice acting, it is a form of music in some degree because you're talking about somebody
yeah,
who you have the lilt and the rise and fall of not just the voice, but the timbre. There's all this music lingo that goes into
yeah,
voice acting. There's a reason that your narrators, your voice actors and things of that nature are, if they're well done, are in high demand and are pricey because you're talking about someone who understands better than you and I how to drop back into that a day later and sound the same.
yeah.
I
I
can't
I
because
can't
I'm not a
voice
pro.
act. I cannot
But
voice act. That's what
yeah,
I've
but
discovered. It's a skill I don't possess.
Neil Gaiman, freaking love everything he writes. This guy could, I've seen him read many, many times, but this guy could walk into an auditorium and read a freaking phone book and we'd all be drooling and hanging on his every word. He is
I was
a,
supposed to hear him in public and
oh,
in person. That we had tickets, my friend and I, to go see him. I forget which place down in New York City, and there was an ice storm, and the roads were covered in ice, and we just could not get to the train to take Metro North into the city because it was just a sheet of ice, and we were so
oh,
heartbroken.
if you,
Neil Gaiman still sent us a signed copy because, like, if you were
yeah,
outside of the city, you couldn't get into the city because it was so
mhm.
bad. But if you're already in the city, you could just take a subway and then just be really careful on the
He has
sidewalks.
He has some recordings on YouTube. I think there's one where he's reading
Yeah, it was
Charles
for the
Dickens' A
Norse
Christmas
book.
Carol.
Yeah.
Yeah, and things like that. Like if you ever can go listen to those, anybody listening to this, it's worth doing because he just has a very melodic voice and he understands how to perform with his voice in a manner that many people don't. There's a reason why publishers don't always want the author to read an audiobook.
Yeah.
And it's because just because you're good at writing doesn't mean you have that other skill set. I don't think I necessarily do. As much as I really do want to read these things, I don't think I necessarily have that skill set. And a good narrator can make or break an
Yeah.
audiobook.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, the idea of finding the right person to narrate these door stoppers, it's a
Yeah.
little intimidating, but it's
I
something
feel
I do
that.
want at some point because I do have readers who have various, disabilities and things that need an audio accommodation. And I can't always meet that. And it's not the same listening to the computer read it to you. Like it
But at
just,
least, yeah, at least we have that, so that
we do.
if we can't, because it's like you said, there's a lot of authors who can't afford to get their books made into audio. So at least when our
Mhm.
eyes need some help, there is a computer that can. So I am grateful for that. It's not the greatest performance
Yeah.
in the world, but I am grateful that there is something. So when I cannot read on screen, at least I can still get some story.
Yeah.
Um,
It's funny, when I'm going through a final run through a book before sending it off to the editor or publisher or whoever it's going to, um, I have my Mac read it to me because it is amazing the typos and things you
mhm.
find that your brain will like slide over that you only find when you hear it. But one of the
Yep.
things that
Because
tickles
the
me.
computer doesn't slide over it. It reads
Mhm.
exactly what is there, which is good when you're editing. Not so great when the editor missed a typo.
Because Amaskan rhymes with Alaskan,
Yeah.
like being from Alaska, it knows Amaskan. It says it fine. It actually says Boahim just fine too. What gets me is when I was listening to, it had to have been one of my short stories set in Seattle, for either an anthology or my short story collection. It might have been Mirror Me. Yeah. The main character is a Seattle Police Department detective. And when I was listening to it read out loud, you would think that it would understand how to say Seattle. It's a major metropolitan city. It's kind of like not knowing how to say New York or Dallas. Every time, Seattle. I
Oh
live outside
no.
of Seattle. Yeah. So the
Oh
first time
no.
that
That's
happened,
painful.
I had to pause and I died laughing because it was just one of those moments where I was like, I leaned over to my wife and I was like, "Hey Molly, guess what? We live in Seattle." And she was like, "What? I don't what?" And then I had to play it for her, and she was like, "Oh wow, that's kind of sad." So that kind of thing happens sometimes, but yes, at least those accommodations exist. It's better than it used to be, in that regard. And I've had some requests for, the Bohemian trilogy in large print, and I'm working on that.
How
When
would you
you,
how would you do that for, because like for 150,000 word book, that would be hard because
yeah,
I looked into large print for I forget who asked me about
that's
that.
that's the one I mean by I'm
And
working
it
on it
has to be at
because
least 20-point font, which fits like very few words per page.
yeah, um, more than likely, both Amaskan's Blood and Amaskan's War in the books are divided. They're subdivided into, part one and part two. There's the camera. Yeah, part two. The idea would probably be dividing it into Amaskan's Blood Part 1 large print, Amaskan's Blood Part 2 large print, like having to
I
subdivide the
see.
books for that to work. I just need to figure out logistically a little bit more whether that would work and making sure that as I'm going through Amaskan's honor, that is still something that can remain true and be doable.
Because when
And
I
so,
tried, it turned my book is 165,000 words, and when I set it to font 20, it made the book 2,000 pages long. And I have part 1 and part 2, but it was you can't go over 800 and something pages for KDP,
mhm.
Amazon. I don't remember what Ingram's limit is. I think it's similar.
I think it
So
is
I was
similar.
like, I'm gonna have to do it in 3 parts, but how do you divide
Mhm.
a book that's in 2 parts into 3 parts? And that's where my brain just kind of
Yeah, and
collapsed in the corner and said, "No, we're not doing this right now."
that's where I think, at least for me, potentially finding an agent could help too, because then it becomes finding the right publisher to do large print who will actually do a print run rather than what we call print on demand in the indie
Yeah.
world,
Oh,
where,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Then you could
so
go up
instead
to a
of,
thousand
because
pages.
then it can be done. It's just getting to the point of that happening. It takes work, and if you want a Amaskan's honor to come out this year, then I juggle what I can juggle. So it's coming eventually, but it may take some time to get to that point. And yeah, so that's just kind of what's going on with the Bohemian trilogy. I talked a bit about the book one being a sister story, um, book two being a Amaskan's War. There's obviously a war, well, a war brewing, and the parts of the beginning of a war as you finish the book. In this trilogy, the story takes place in what I call the little dozen kingdoms, and it used to be one big country called Bohemian, and they couldn't. There was a lot of war and conflict, and they basically had a civil war of a sort and split into 12 kingdoms so that everybody could do what they wanted to do, so to speak. And um, the part of what was trying to keep war from breaking out again was, at the time that Bohemian split, there was the development of the Bohemian Senate. So yes, there's both a Senate and kingdoms in this. I like to play around with things.
That's
The
cool.
Bohemian Senate is made up of 12 people. They're voted in, and their job is to ensure that even the rulers of these little dozen kingdoms follow the 12. And these 12 are laws that are passed down from the gods to basically keep mankind in check, humankind in check. And so it's kind of like their version of the Ten Commandments in some regard. Um, the difference is that if you have a king who does something against the 12, the Senate is allowed to come in and punish that king. So um, not even kings get away with murder, so to speak. They kind of look the other way with the Order of Amaska, because they recognize that the order is attempting to at least make people follow the 12 and in their justice seeking and killing of bad people. But when we get to Amaskan's War, civil war, I guess I shouldn't call it civil war, but war in general is brewing again. There's a conflict between the kingdoms. Sorry about that.
That's okay. You know, it
I have my
happens.
phone on mute and it still went off on an alarm.
Somebody
There's
really is trying to get a hold of you.
Yeah, nah,
Maybe your characters don't want you to keep going down this line of thought.
that was literally the "it's time to feed the cats" alarm, which
Oh,
doesn't apply to me right now because I'm on here. But there's a conflict brewing between the kingdoms and the Senate. The kingdoms don't want to be ruled by the Senate anymore. The Senate doesn't want to give up their power. Big surprise. So there's a lot of conflict that happens with that, and I'm being vague on purpose because I'm trying not to spoil things in case people haven't read Amaskan's Blood, and so I'm having to mince my words in terms of what's going on in book two. Book three is kind of the culmination of that war and the aftermath and what happens. in terms of, do they still have a senate? Do they still have kingdoms? Did they reunite as Boheme? Like, what's going on? And so there's a lot of political intrigue in my stories, because I think you can't write about family and you can't write about characters without it.
Hmm.
You're
Agreed.
just going to have that element of conflict, of all these different, groups and sects that are like at odds with each other and trying to find a way to either get rid of each other or mesh together and unite as a unified front against something. That's just, that's the nature of things. um, and so that's kind of, I don't know, the series, the trilogy in a nutshell, for people who aren't familiar with it. And
It's,
I know that we've talked a lot about family, and I'm going to use that as a segue.
yes.
um,
I think I know what's coming. Go for it.
yeah, you totally do. So because of all of the oddness of my life, my surprise family is not the only adversity or struggle that I've met in my life. I'm disabled, I am queer, I'm non-binary, and before I was a full-time author, I was a teacher, and I taught English and computer classes in Texas. And it's one thing to be a queer teacher in, say, Washington State, where I am now, where that's not a big deal. It's another to do that in Texas. And if you've paid attention at all to the news in the past, well, since Trump got elected, uh, you know that there is a lot of conflict between some of America and the rest of America, especially when it comes to gay rights and transgender rights and all of those things. But also, there's a lot of conflict in terms of removing books from school libraries if they even mention slavery existed. There's a lot going on undercurrent wise and openly about um, our history and where we're going in the future as a nation. And so, with all of that in my life, and having taught through all of that, and now as a writer through all of that, um, I found myself going back to how many readers and friends have told me when I tell stories about my experiences, you really should write that down. And so I kept coming back to that idea. And I think this year I reached a point where I could not stay silent anymore. There's a lot of things that happen to me that I know I'm not alone in. I know that there are other people who have been through these experiences, but so many of us are taught to keep quiet about it. Don't make waves, don't make trouble. If you keep your head down, then nobody's going to beat you up on the street for being gay, or things that, we run into that kind of stuff, and we're told that. And I just got sick of being quiet. I got sick of basically being the person who's told to sit in the corner and be good. And so, there's a phrase that a lot of people in the queer community use of be gay, do crime. And my brain just kind of went there on hardcore mode in January. And I found, instead of working on Amaskan's Honor, I spent 22 days writing a memoir that was a complete accident. And it was the fastest I've ever written 80,000 words in my life. And it just poured out of me in a way I've never had writing come out of me. I could not stop the words until the story was done. And so I ended up with Voices Carry. It's a story of teaching, transitions, and truths. And you don't have to be a teacher to read it. You don't have to be a member of the queer community to read it. If you have ever dealt with people trying to silence your truth, then whatever that truth may be, this is kind of the story for you. And it's, I talk a lot about all the different ways that we try to silence each other. not just children, but adults as well. And there's a lot in here too of times when I was a guest at a convention and other colleagues of mine, other writers, people who should know better, tried to silence me, tried to tell me that no one wanted to know about that gay thing or that gay thing, or nobody wanted to know about this, that, or the other. They wanted to keep things simple so that no one could feel uncomfortable. But life is uncomfortable. Reality is uncomfortable. We kind of talked about that a little bit with talking about dark fantasy and talking about fantasy in general, that, when you talk about real things and events that happen, there's darkness to some of that. And so, this is kind of me walking through all of that and processing it. But it's also me processing, finding myself. For all that I'm queer and non-binary now, I didn't always realize that those were the terms for it growing up, because I grew up not just in a time, but in a state where there just weren't very many gay people. I didn't have the vocabulary to know that non-binary, specifically agender, was a thing. Like, I just didn't know those words. And so, a lot of my realizations about who I am as a person and as a writer didn't happen until my late 30s. And my wife recently came out as transgender, and non-binary falls under the transgender umbrella because I was assigned female at birth and I no longer identify with that assigned gender. And so both of us have also together been exploring what that means, relationship wise, but life wise. And so there's been a lot of, transitions in finding my own truth, but in also speaking out against being silenced. And so there's a song from the 80s from Till Tuesday called Voices Carry. And Amy Mann was actually the lead front for Till Tuesday. And this song, when it came out, was a huge hit. And there were times where MTV threatened to not show the video because the song is these two people are in a relationship, and the boyfriend or husband or male character is abusive to the female character, but is constantly telling her to keep her voice down and to hush, because voices carry, because the idea that other people might hear and then know he's an asshole, that he's a bad person, and that he's doing these things to her. And that was my childhood growing up in a nutshell. And so I couldn't think of a more perfect title than that to represent the idea of breaking down silence. And I want my voice to carry. I want these words out there. I want people to know they're not alone, and I will not be quiet. Forget that. And so that's kind of where that title came from and where this memoir came from. And I've been trying to talk a lot about it of late, because I think that with everything going on, as I've mentioned, politically and as a nation, these kinds of stories, us telling our own voices and not being silenced, is critical. That's why people are protesting on college campuses right now. And so it's this thing that if we are to remember that we are a village and that we are all together on this pale little blue dot, we have to be willing to hear each other. But that also means you have to be willing to say the things that you need to say. And so, yeah, that's Voices Carry. It comes out in August. Pre-order is already up for it. And
you're going to give me a link to put in the show notes in the description.
Absolutely.
Put that down. That's your homework.
Yes.
Nobody leaves the podcast without homework.
Yeah. If you're one of those people that you use books to read at all, Books to Read is a really cool site where you can look up a book and it will show you links to all the different places you can buy the book. And it's a free service. so it didn't cost you any money. But that way, if you're like, oh, I don't want to necessarily just have to buy it from Amazon, or I want to buy it from somewhere else, it will literally show you Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kobo, Apple, wherever. If you're outside of the country, it has Angus and Robertson up there. I think it's Robinson, something like that. It's Australia.
Yeah.
Sorry, Aussies. But there's it'll show you all the different places the book's available. And so Voices Carry is up on there. I think it's bookstory.com/Voices Carry. So easy URL. But you can also just search on their search thingy and it'll come up. And that way you can find a link in the country that you're in or wherever and have access to it as well that way. But yeah, it's an important book, and I hope that it not just that I want it to sell well, but I hope it goes out there and does what it's supposed to do, that people read it and connect and talk. Because that's why I write anything. I mean, even Amaskan's Blood, my purpose was to get people to talk, to ask questions, to connect, to think. I'm a big thinker, and I'm the person who stays up till 3 a.m. having philosophical discussions with Molly about randomness, just because. Call it my inner intellect. But, it carries through, I think, with this book particularly.
That's cool that you have philosophical discussions. I lay at night thinking about, okay, what plot holes do we want to actually fill and which plot holes do we want to leave? So we have to write another book to explain this or fill this in or explore this, because this is too fun and I don't want to fill this plot hole in right now. I want to take care of that in another book where I have space. You would have 100,000 words to see, what is this? Why is this? What can we do with this?
That happens to me later. I go to sleep after these philosophical conversations, and then I wake up at 5:30 in the morning with oh, I need to write this down. That just filled my plot hole. And then I'm typing on my phone, trying not to wake up Molly. And sometimes I actually get up and go into the bathroom and hit the voice recorder and talk to myself and then send it to my email. And then I wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh yeah, that's what I was talking about. Or I look at it and go, that did not go from speech to text well, and I don't know what a garbler is. What word was I thinking there? I don't know. Yeah, that's what happens to me.
Yeah. It's sometimes speech attached is so scarily accurate, and sometimes, I know I didn't say that. I don't know what the Google AI was on at the time, but that is not what I said.
Yeah, no, very, very true.
And I don't think I have that thick of an accent, but sometimes the words it chooses are weird.
I can hear some of the Northeast, but not too heavy, actually. Because my aunts, they're up in Michigan and New Hampshire and then various areas, and their accent is much thicker than yours in terms of the Northeast accent. And then you get people like me where certain words my Texas drawl picks up, and then some words my Floridian picks up, and some words my Californian picks up. Military brat, moved around a lot, so I have dialect and accent from many regions, and it all just kind of meshes into randomness me. So I'm sure speech to text has all kinds of fun trying to figure out what in the world I'm trying to say.
For some reason, it thinks I'm talking about name brands, because I will look at speech to text things in the middle of the night and it'll be just a string of name brands with the and but interspersed between them. And I'm like, I did not say Bisquick. There's no universe in which I said that into speech to text or NASCAR or was it Grands biscuits? I was like, there's no universe where I said these things in a, this is not even a sentence.
I'm trying to think of what fantasy word you could have said that would have been so like biscuit that you'd get Grand's biscuits and Bisquick. I can see the connections linguistically there, but I can't think of what fantasy word you were trying for.
I don't think
bug me for the rest of the evening. I swear.
The funny thing is, I very rarely ever make up fantasy words because then I have to remember them. So everybody speaks it's all translated into English. They're speaking what they're speaking. They're not speaking
Yeah.
what.
Well,
But
I mean,
everything in the book is in English. I have only a handful of words that I make up when I absolutely cannot find some English equivalent, because most of this is humorous. So they don't need to know that the serious fantasy word for it. They're going to call it the spinning black thing because that's what it looks like to them, and because
I
that's
mean,
funny.
I don't use thee and thou, and I'm
Yeah.
certainly not doing anything like that. I mean, for me, I think the language of Bohemian, I maybe have 35 words made up total
That's cool.
in the what we call the series Bible, which is
Yeah.
what authors use to keep track of all that stuff.
It's all
And
in here.
certain words get used a lot. Amaskan is one of them. Bohemian is one of them, but most of them it's more flavor text, occasional dropped in, name of a plant, and it has a description of why it's called that. I I love linguistics and I love looking at etymology. This is not entomology, which is the study of insects. We're talking about etymology, which is the history of a word. For me, when I'm creating
I'm
things,
glad you said that, because in my head, somebody posted a meme about that. And when you said it, the meme just jumped into my head in like full color and
yeah,
text. And I'm sitting here like, I can't laugh. I can't laugh. No one else's brain is like this and is getting the same thing.
yeah, no, it's one of those things where, like, with, for example, Bohemian, I wanted a word that meant Holy Land, and I wanted it to have the recognition pattern of Hebrew.
Ah,
Bohemian looks like a Hebrew word. It is not a Hebrew word. It just looks like a Hebrew word. And that's where my joy of word creation comes in, because I can understand, okay, this is what French diction looks like. This is what Italian diction looks like. These are stylistically what their language looks like. And so I can go in and squiggle and move things around to where you swear you're reading something that's Italian, and it looks Italian, but it means literally nothing in Italian. But on the back end of that, the word I used for Bohemian that I squigged and moved around a little actually means Holy Land in Hebrew. And so what
oh,
I'll do
wow.
is I'll go into a language dictionary and I'll look up what words mean what I want them to mean, and then just kind of smudge them a little, where you look at it and go, that looks Hebrew. I don't speak Hebrew, but that looks Hebrew. But it's really not. And so that's kind of how I create some of those words and phrases that are incredibly necessary plot wise in some of the books. And it makes
That's
sense when
cool.
I've got like 12 kingdoms. Each kingdom, I rooted their language in an existing country. And so you might have the Kingdom of Alexander, which is very French based, architecture, language, very French influenced. But you have a country like Sadai, which is very Israel. And then you have um, Shad, which is very India. And so it's not like you're reading something set in India, because I don't want to appropriate, but it's more of a, I wanted my worlds to feel real. And any world that is created, any author who creates their own world, nothing is created whole cloth from nothing. Everything is influenced by something.
Mhm.
I wanted my influences to feel close enough to something to give you that sense of, this is, ooh, this makes sense. This feels real. I can picture this. I mean, if you've never been to India, you still may be able to picture in your mind what you think India looks like, because we've seen pictures on the internet. We live in the age of information where you go Google Maps and you type in India and you can go down to Street View and boom, you're in India suddenly. And so I played on that when I created these kingdoms. And so each kingdom, it's not anything, you're never going to pick up Amaskan's Blood and be like reading and the author's writing something that says, oh, in this world it's based on this. Like, you're never going to see that. But on the
Mhm.
back end of it, when I'm designing and creating these kingdoms and places and people and their languages, that's what I'm thinking about, is those connections that make things feel more real.
No, that's cool.
But that's my geek out thing that
That's
I
so
do.
cool. I admire people who create their own languages. I try, but that's not a skill that I possess. So I just decided, like, I don't want to appropriate other people's culture, so I'm just going to appropriate my own.
It's weird because
and my
languages,
ancestors, wherever they
yeah,
came from, that's all mine. It's in the blood. I may play
languages are
with that.
hard.
Yeah.
Well, for all that I understand linguistics and I can tell you about the history of a word and I can geek out and create things, learning a foreign language for me, my autistic brain just does not do it. Like there's something a disconnect, and I struggle. I just cannot. I mean,
It's hard.
I've had like 6 years of Spanish and I still can't
I
do
took
much at
French
all.
from when I was 12 until I was 22, and I can't remember a single word from it anymore.
I can still say my alphabet in French. I took a year of
I
French.
can't.
And I think I'm one of those people. It's genetically I'm what you would call a mutt. Yes, I have a couple countries where my family's like very strong, but then I'm also the Heinz 57 of Europe, where there's all this everything. There's probably not a country in Europe that I can't trace roots to
Right.
at some point, but I'm kind of like that with languages. I can speak a smattering of Chinese, of Mandarin, which is really interesting when you're a teacher and a kid comes up to you and calls you a bad word in Mandarin and thinks you won't know. And then you turn around and say something back and call them a bad word in response. And they're looking at you like, and then they in perfect English go, "You just cussed at me." And I went, "Mm-hmm, I did. But you cussed at me first." And they just they're not sure whether they want to report you or not, and then they'd have to admit that they cussed you out in another language.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it makes for fun time. But I'm kind of like that with a lot of languages where, you know, when I was a kid, I was babysat by a woman who was from Iran, and so I spent a time learning Farsi,
Oh,
because
wow.
that's what she was teaching her children. And so when she was babysitting me and she was giving lessons in Farsi to her kids, I got to learn those too. Um,
That's
and so
amazing.
I only remember a smattering of it because I was really young, but I have all these languages I know just little bits and pieces of, and it doesn't really do me any good when, you want to have a conversation.
That's no, I had great difficulty conversing in a foreign language. I could read it.
Yeah.
I could read.
Yep.
I read Simone de Beauvoir's, I don't remember which one of her books. One of them in a college class, a French literature class in French. But I
Hmm.
had great difficulty holding conversations in French. But I could read
Yeah.
it.
Hmm. Oh, I know. You hand me a book in Spanish and I can read it too.
I don't think I could.
But
Well,
speaking it,
might be able to
I
read
guess,
some of it.
I almost wonder if there's a similar disconnect with, the fact that long COVID impacted my speaking more than other things cognitive wise. If there's some connection to that goes with the cognitive disconnect in learning languages for me. Like if there's some, like, I don't know, something connected in the part of the brain that does all of that. Because that would kind of make sense why I can read something but can't necessarily speak it well. You know, part of your brain that controls speech is different from the part of your brain that reads.
Yeah.
They're different parts of the brain. So I don't know. See, this would be a 3 a.m. conversation right now.
Oh, okay.
Just
Oh,
sometimes,
I feel blessed
yeah,
that we're
sometimes
having
it's
one.
about really in-depth things that are serious,
Right.
but sometimes it's just literally, why was that mushroom in Super Mario Brother World 1-3 located there and not there? Like sometimes it's really stupid things, or geeking out about something in particular. But yeah, this, like, what's the connection? Maybe somebody listening will know. Anybody know if there's a connection
Is
between,
it like the right brain, left brain kind of a
sort
situation?
of, the brain
It's
doesn't
like
really
it's
work
in
quite like that. It's
okay.
sort of like, different lobes of the brain do have different areas that they address, and there's definitely like it's why if somebody suffers brain damage, they may still be able to read, but they won't necessarily be able to talk, because the part of the brain
Yeah.
that got damaged is different, for both of
Yeah.
those
I'm
things.
very familiar with that. With my brother had a brain tumor when I was in high school and had surgery, and my father had a stroke. So I'm very
Yeah,
familiar with the ways the brain can be
yeah,
disrupted, and it's miraculous that you can lose your ability to walk and talk and regain it
yeah.
if you work at it. Like it's
Hmm.
amazing. The brain is truly amazing. I mean,
It can
he
heal in the wildest of ways. Like,
yeah, but you still lose something because my
mhm,
father cannot remember anything from before the stroke. So he can't remember my
yeah,
sister who passed away the year before his stroke. He cannot remember her at all. He knows about her, and it makes him very sad that he cannot remember her at all.
yeah. That's tough, and
Yeah.
it's just the brain, we don't understand it very well, and I think the left brain right brain thing, eh, it's really an oversimplification of the way the brain works. It feels like to me like when we are looking at a first grade classroom and we're trying to explain the Big Bang, you don't tell a first grader in great depth how physics works and how astrophysics works and how everything's slowly moving outward at this rate that's so infinitesimal that we can't even comprehend it. Like, you don't get into all that. It's easier to just tell them that there was nothing and then boom bang and then there was something. You simplify it. And I feel like the right brain versus left brain conversation, it's a simplification of the way the brain works. But it's also we don't really know how the brain works completely, so we're just kind of guessing part of that too.
That's true.
And so I don't know, I kind of view it that way, because no one is using only one side of their brain or the other in that
Oh yeah.
sense.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah.
there are certainly people who only have half of a brain. But it's not
Yeah.
like
From
if they have
traumatic
half a
injury.
brain, they're suddenly all analytical and have no emotions anymore. Like, it doesn't quite
I mean,
balance.
I've met some people who were like so analytical. I'm not
Oh
sure
yeah.
they actually felt an emotion ever that wasn't intellectual
Hmm.
curiosity or boredom. Um,
Yeah.
not naming names. And if you're listening to this podcast, I am probably talking about you.
Yeah.
You know who you are.
No, there's definitely various, you know, disabilities, learning disabilities, psychoses, all you can get into all that stuff about why some
Yeah.
people have emotions more than others, and you know, it's complicated.
And why? I mean, I think it goes towards like it's like the what you were starting, what you were talking about before. Like we're only just starting to have vocabularies and to think about all the ways in which things intersect. You
Hmm.
know, all the different ways that people are and exist, because we are multi-dimensional
Yeah.
uh, people.
Well,
Like we don't, you are not just your job that you go to, you are not just the food that you eat, you're a summation of
mhm,
everything you do, everything you think, everything you eat, everything that you have been doing for the past however many years you have been here, because that has an
mhm,
effect on you. There's in and the environment that you're currently in and the things that you are currently doing, all of that has an effect.
absolutely. And it's kind of oh, I had something and then I think it fell out
I'm
of my tongue.
sorry.
That's okay. No, 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 no. It was when you were talking, you said something that triggered something and then my
Oh,
brain
maybe the
went away.
intersection, that we are an
Um,
intersection of all of the things that make us who we
oh,
are,
yeah.
and we
So,
don't have, we may not have words or explanations. Or go on, I don't
mhm.
want you to lose it again.
the the native peoples of this nation, many of them have had two-spirit and various genders in existence for much longer than this country has existed. And you can even go back into Hinduism and various religions, Greek mythology. I mean, just all kinds of stuff way back that have expressed gender identification and attraction and all of those different identities in so many ways that are not just the binary male female. or gay straight. Like there's everything feels and seems to be this massive spectrum,
Which
which
is
those of us
cool.
who are autistic, we totally understand that idea. But I think now that things are changing, more and more people who used to think things were very black and white are starting to realize that this spectrum exists. And so now,
Yeah.
yeah, we're getting the vocabulary we need to be able to say, well, this is me over here, and this is you over here, and we
Yeah.
can
And
still coexist and be happy together. And
and I like that there's no longer like people are starting to see like you don't have to get married and have children if you don't like
yeah,
that's not something that I want. I don't want that. I
yeah,
like living alone. I like being on my own and having friends and just that just filling my life with friendship and family and that's enough for me. That's
yeah.
all I want. And that's okay now that there's words for this. There's like I have to say that's why I think your book is so important is that even to people who don't realize it is important that there's other
Mhm.
decisions that they can be making. Like when I was in college, I thought you had to get married and have kids. And that filled me with an utter sense of existential dread because it was not a thing that I wanted.
Yeah. Well, and I'm married, but I've never wanted children, and I've known that since I was 3. And it's amazing to me when people are like, "Oh, well, a 3-year-old doesn't know their gender." Yeah, they do. Yeah, they
Yes,
do.
a 3-year-old knows if they want kids or not. I remember it was in
Yeah.
for kindergarten or first grade, they wanted us to write an essay about our future, and like I knew that I had to write that I was going to get married and have kids, even though that was like not a thing that I wanted at all. I
Hmm.
wanted to be some itinerant storyteller
Well,
with a basket full of fairy dust, and just fly around and tell people stories and make them
yeah.
happy, entertain
Well,
them. I'm
every
not
year
far off from
growing up,
it. I write books.
everybody told me, "Oh, you'll change your mind. You'll change your mind." I'm 46. I still haven't changed my mind.
Yeah, me either.
I have known since I was able to hold a pencil and at 2.5 when I was reading and writing already that I wanted to be a writer. That's never changed. I've known since then that I wanted to educate and help others. That's never changed. I've always known that, you know, if I got married, I didn't want kids. I wanted furry children that, they didn't really talk back so much. And I
I
could
mean,
snuggle
you
with
have
them.
cats. Cats
Yes, I
do
know.
talk back.
They do
They have
talk
their
back.
own ways of talking back.
Yes, they do.
They make it known their opinions, and
Yes, yes. No,
they make sure
you
you
are
know that
correct.
you're their servant.
Yeah, no, you are correct. But I knew what I wanted, and that didn't change. And I may not have always had the words for
Mm,
who I was, but I knew who I was.
yeah,
And
that's good. I had to cave to societal pressures, and for a
oh,
while,
I
like
did a lot of that
pretend
growing
like
up.
we were gonna actually like and do the whole dating apps and things because everybody in there was like, "Oh, you have to do this, you have to do this," and I'm like, oh, "I don't want to do this. I
When
don't want to do this. This is not a thing that I want." So it never worked, and that was why it never worked. That's why
I
there was a
talk,
string of first dates that never went anywhere. I'm
yeah, yeah,
sorry if you're
uh,
listening. I didn't want it to go anywhere. I'm very sorry. But I didn't string
I
anybody along. I just told them, "Hey, I don't think this is going to work. Have a
I
good evening. It
talk
was good hanging out with you. We want different things."
I talk about that in Voices Carry a little bit because I was raised in an abusive household that was very religious, and the expectation was that I would live at home until I found a good little Christian boy who would my father would then hand me off to this person as if I was a cattle piece to be owned. And when I say religious household, there was a my family's made up of like a mix of Southern Baptist, evangelical, and Pentecostal. We're talking can't cut your hair skirt wearing, like
Oh,
serious
I grew
hardcore.
up in
Yeah.
the Italian Roman Catholic household.
Oh yeah.
I have, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I can imagine it's
Yeah.
not the same thing, but
And
I can imagine I went to religious instruction with all the other, um,
it's
basically
one of
Catholic
those.
school light for the public
Yeah.
school kids.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things. Where I grew up, even the Catholics pretended to be evangelical because you'd be run out of town if you didn't. And it was one of those scenarios where as a teenager, it was expected. Well, not by family, because that's, the religious people, but by my peers, people of my age, it was expected that I would have a boyfriend and that I would want to kiss this boy and that I would want to, um, be with this person. And there was pressure to, conform to what society's expectation of what a relationship looked like. I'm demisexual. And for people who don't know what that means,
Yeah, I don't know what that
demisexual
means.
demisexual falls under the ace or asexual umbrella. It's not necessarily ace, but it's kind of tangential. Demisexual means that I have to have a very strong personal relationship with someone before there is any sexual attraction. So when somebody is like pulling out Teen Beat magazine back in the day in the 80s or
Uh,
whatever, and they're looking at the hot throb and they're getting all hot and bothered as little teens and their hormones are running, did nothing for me.
okay. Yeah,
Did nothing
same.
for
I
me.
was like, okay, they're good
Um,
looking. I mean, I just can
you can
appreciate
appreciate the
beautiful
aesthetic
people, but
of
I'm like,
beauty, sure.
yeah, if I saw them
Um,
in the street, I'd be like, hey, but that be
yeah,
it. I would not have
but
that would
because of
yeah.
that, you know, a lot of the guys who had asked me out, I didn't really know them and I had no desire at all to kiss them. It was just expected that I would. And so then I got labeled a prude because,
Mhm.
obviously I was not willing to do things other girls were willing to do.
That's when you
Um,
lean on your religious background and be like, "Oh, I could
right,
never,"
right.
you know?
Um,
That
but
that's when religion can save you. He'd be like, "Oh, I can't,"
it's kind of the same
It's
thing now, oddly enough. Like I have a lot of friends that, they write romantasy, so romance fantasy, and they like their bodice ripping covers with these hot guys and in very promiscuous poses with these women, and they write this stuff that then, and you know what, if you like smut, that's fine, I have no problem with it, but it does nothing for me. You can put like the most awesome sex scene from Game of Thrones or something that was racy at the time or whatever on the TV screen, and it's like reading a computer manual.
mm, I know
I
that
don't have a
feeling.
connection, so it means nothing.
Mm,
Now, if you are
well, it
my
just means
best,
nothing.
if you are my best friend forever and I love you dearly and I know you on a personal level, then I can feel attraction because then I know your interior.
Mhm.
It's the intellectual humor, whatever, the interior part becomes the rationale for attraction in someone who's often demi.
I see, I see. I
And
don't
some demi
I
people,
just like hanging out with people. I
yeah,
don't want any sort of anything. Just
because
wanna
like
be
I can look at something like Chris Evans from the Marvel movies, and people
oh, he's
drool
beautiful.
over him. And I look at him and go, okay, I'm an artist, so from a I can draw this standpoint, he is fairly, I'm blanking on the term, but he's fairly balanced in his features.
I
He
think
doesn't
it's
have an
I think
overly
it's the
sized,
characters that he portrays too, like the Captain America,
yeah.
the really good person. I think that's why I find him attractive. Is the
So,
character that he plays is
yeah,
attractive from a like in what is it how they act on
yeah,
how they act towards
hmm,
people, how they are like they would make good friend material, and that's why I
yeah.
find them attractive. I think that's
Like, I found the term
words.
symmetry. Symmetry. He is
Okay, that's it.
symmetrical. He is aesthetically pleasing to most people's eyes because he is symmetrical.
Ah,
But he does nothing for me. Whereas my wife, because I have an intense, intimate relationship with her, and she was my best friend long before we
oh,
ever were an
that's
item.
so
When we were high
sweet.
school sweethearts, we're really sappy that way.
Oh,
Um, but because of that, now when I look at her figure, it's like, oh, I really like your legs. I like where you're, like, as Wash says about his wife Zoe in Firefly, I like where your legs meet your ass. And, I can have feelings because there's a relationship there. But demi people, we don't get that. A one night stand would never happen for a demisexual person because we don't have attraction to random people we don't know. We just don't. And that's part of why it falls under the asexual umbrella.
Mm.
A lot of people kind of go, well, that's kind of close to, this, so we're going to put it
No,
over here.
I get it. It's a spectrum. It's a whole spectrum, and we all want different things. I just find it fun that like my friend Melissa, we were born on the same day, the same year, in different states at different times, and neither one of us ever wants to get married or have kids. I just find that like so interesting.
But there are more and more people. Like I'm in a lot of different groups on social media, but I see more and more people in their 60s and 70s who are like, wow, I'm Demi and I had no idea that was a thing. Or, oh my gosh, I'm non-binary and I didn't know that was a thing. Like people who are starting to, it's almost like when I realized these terms existed, puzzle pieces in my brain clicked.
I can see that.
And suddenly my whole childhood and every decision I've made in terms of my identity made sense suddenly. It's like when you see a good meme and go, I'm in that,
Yeah,
that's me. And
all the writer ones are me.
Yeah.
I am all writing memes.
But it's the same thing. And so, part of Voices Carry, it's not a whole, like, I had a horrible life memoir. And there are plenty of those. And there's definitely, definitely some struggles I went through in it. But part of the joy in writing it also was the confirmation of, yeah, this is me. I now have the terms to identify myself. I now have the terms to express to others and explain who I am. And in doing
at
so,
this point in time, and these things can change because you are not fixed.
I'm not static.
You are evolving.
That's correct.
Continually.
Yeah, everybody is. And my hope is that people reading it may go, oh wow, that's me. And then may make a connection not just with others but with themselves better, and have a better understanding of who they are, what they want, and to know that, yeah, you're not alone, and it's totally okay if you don't want to get married, and it's totally okay if you don't want children, and it's totally okay if you don't want to go fuck Chris Evans every day. It's cool. It's cool. Whatever.
I just want to be his friend.
That too, right? Oh yeah.
But like I'd be afraid that I'd find out that he's not like he is in the Captain America movies, because that's who I want to be friends with, Captain America.
Yeah, and I can totally understand that, because having the life that I've had,
and Black Widow, because I love her.
I have met, they say never meet your idols. I have met people I idolized that ended up being complete douchebags and were horrible people, and I no longer idolize them. And then there are people that I did meet that absolutely lived up to it. And so, it varies, but yeah, there is always that danger of, when you're like, God, the idea of Captain America is so cool. And, hey, me, I like the whole justice thing. So yeah. But sometimes, they don't always live up to it. Though from what I hear, he is a really awesome person. So who knows?
Yeah, I would love to be friends with the Captain America character, Black Widow, and Hawkeye. Those were my three favorite Avengers. As long as they are in a film together, I will watch it. I adore them. I would love to be their friend.
Yeah.
I can handle their social calendar or something. I'm really good at project management. Don't the Avengers need a project manager?
Right. Avengers, come on, you have press stuff
hire me.
Put out, I can edit it.
Really? Yeah. We can be your dream team. We can manage your whole everything, whatever you need. You want to wreck New York City? That's fine. Well, just give me a heads up so I'm not wherever you're going to be trashing.
Well, I hate to bring it up, but we have been going for an hour and a half. And,
yeah.
We should probably wrap this up, because I do know that my wife is probably like, are we having dinner anytime soon?
And, that's right.
I'm behind you. It's 6:15 here, so
it's 9:15 here. So I am, and it is May the 3rd. So any dates given are based upon that day in the year 2024.
Yes.
That's why I'm a bit punchy. It's like 9:00 in the evening, and I was working all day. So don't mind me if I'm a bit giggly. I'm losing it. And it
Oh,
was a
it's all
fabulous
good.
conversation too. I'm just really
Oh,
happy you came on because I've
me
been like,
too.
I've wanted so badly to have you on here as I could talk to you in person because I do admire you so much. I think it's so
Oh, thank
awesome that you're
you.
able to do the traditional author thing and do the indie author thing. And you're a woman who's doing this, which I think is amazing. Um, yeah, and we did the anthology together, which was like sort of a dream come true. And getting to work with you so closely on it. You were just amazing on it, like all the extra help on it because I was really over my head on that, and with my full-time job being as crazy as it is, and
Mhm.
I was just cannot express in words how grateful I am for the help that you get. I was totally like I had no idea what I was getting into when I took that on. And I'm so glad it was such a success for everyone.
On my indie side, I run my own small press and I've published others. And so yes, I am very aware of the work involved in doing anthology work and working with other authors and just everything that is involved in that. And yeah, it's hard. And considering you were doing that with another full-time job on top of it is commendable because it's hard. Like it really is.
I mean, the
So
project part I could manage. It's like, but trying to manage the 20 different, well, it was even more than it was 23 people. And then a few people had to be cut. And that was very difficult. And I didn't even think that was something that we would have to deal with. And how do you do that in a collective project? And I think we
mhm,
found a good way of doing that. And it's always sad to have to not to kick people out, but like if people can't meet the deadline, it's not fair to other
mhm.
people.
Yeah.
And we put pre-orders up, and everything was aware well before. And thank you, universe, for closing the entire world, so they bought her book. So and I'm just incredibly, I cannot express how grateful I am. One of my closest friends published his first story in there, and it was an amazing experience for him that finally got him to actually fight for his dream. So Steve, if you're listening, finish that book already. And yes, I'm calling him out. He's one of my closest friends. I'm allowed to do that on a podcast. um, I'll wait for the text message when you hear this. Thank you so much for coming on here. Is there anything else you
Sure.
want to say about Amaskan's blood or Amaskan's honor? I'm sorry if I'm slaughtering it. My brain is like
Okay. It's
firing
really late
on
for you.
three
Just
cylinders.
if people want to find out more about any of my works, my artwork, where I am on social media, any of that kind of
Artwork
thing,
is beautiful.
um, ravenoak.net is for my writing. The artofravenoak.com is for my art. Um, Everything social media is on there. You can get to just about everything. So, either of those two sites. And I will make sure it'll probably be tomorrow, but I will shoot you links and things that you might need or want for the session notes or whatever they're called, so that you've got those for anybody who is watching, reading, listening, whatever your choice may be.
Awesome. Awesome. Is there anything else you want to say about Voices Carry, since we also did a special segment on
Um,
that? I want to give it its own brief, well, its own
yeah,
closing.
just that it's probably one of the most important things I've ever written. And I don't say that lightly, considering that I have an entire shelf and a half behind me of stuff I've written. So if you get it and you like it, tell others. It's word of mouth and personal recommendation sells more books than anything else. And being that I have long COVID and am disabled, I can no longer attend conventions and do the things that I used to meet all of y'all out there and tell you about my stuff. And so this is it. Um, if you want to hear more of my stuff, you got to tell other people that you enjoyed it. And that applies for Melinda's works or any writer's works. If you love something, tell others and recommend they get it. Like really push the idea of giving books as gifts more and encouraging others to read.
No, that's a good idea. I need to. Well, no, yeah, I can get my mom some more ebooks.
Well, you know,
She reads so many books a year. She's always giving me recommendations. And like, okay, it's I'll get to it. She's
one
such
last
a
one
voracious
last
reader.
segue. One last segue. In Iceland, I don't remember what they call it, but in Iceland, what they do instead of Christmas, their version of it is they give books,
I
and they
heard
spend a
about
whole day
that.
as a family reading a book. And they don't have to
So
read the same
cool.
book, but they're in the same room all reading. That's their holiday. And I
Wow.
wish we were more inclined to do something like that in this country, but I'm going to fight for everybody to read books. So, yeah, read books.
And she's
Buy
going to come
books.
back and talk about books. It's like this is not a one-time thing.
No,
She's
I
going to
will
come
be back.
back.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh no,
Absolutely.
you are welcome back absolutely anytime you want to come and talk to me. Come talk to me.
Will
I want to
do.
hear what you're doing and share it.
I would be happy to.
Yeah, no, you're very very welcome. The door is wide open. Both doors. If there are two doors, I don't know. It's all digital. I don't know how many doors there are. They're all open.
You have entered the 10th dimension of doors.
That would be fun, actually, or maybe not. I'm not sure. I'm too tired. I'm not awake enough to think about the physics and the ramifications of that.
Mhm.
But thank you so much for coming, and this has been Raven Oak, and she has been wonderful. Oh no, did I mess up the pronouns? My brain is like mushy.
The nice thing about being agender, it's a particular part of non-binary that means that gender, I don't have a particular gender. So for me, any pronouns, I don't care.
Oh,
That's
okay.
the lovely thing about my gender identity.
I forgot
So
to ask that. It was like that was one of the things
it's
like
okay.
I meant to ask to make sure that I'm like correct, and I did not remember to
It's
ask that. I
okay.
apologize
So
because this
for
is safe,
everybody,
supportive space.
yep, no, it's all good. So you did fine.
Awesome. So thank you so much, so much for coming. This has been like this has been just wonderful. Just been looking forward to this for so long. So thank you for coming. I've been Melinda Kucsera. This has been another episode of Fantasy Lore and More, and we'll be back with another fantasy author and another fantasy book soon. And Raven will be coming back, and it'll be wonderful. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back soon. I'm losing all my words. Thank you.